Hi, I'm Natalie, owner of the Sewing Studio, and today I'm going to show you how to make this really cute project, the Chevron pillow that would be great for decorating around your home. It's a nice one to put together. It uses half square triangles and is a great scrap buster. So let's take a look at the pieces that we'll need to get this one together. All right, so for our back of the pillow, you can actually make half square triangles to put on the back of that one. I'll show you that at the end, or you can use fabric just to cover the back. You'll need at least a fat quarter of fabric, and then what I did is I just divided that in half along the length so that we have two pieces that are more like 10 by 18 or 18 and a half inches. And then we'll have a zipper to put in our back, and then I use a flap to cover up my zipper so that it doesn't show. And this strip is cut 4 inches wide by at least 18 inches, and then I've ironed it in half so that I have a finished edge and then the raw edges are on the other side. So that's what we'll need to put the back on. For the fabrics on the front, you need at least 3 colors. So that can be a mixture or whatever you need, but what we end up having is that on ours we used black and orange and white, and so what we'll end up needing is on our half square triangles, we will need to create 12 that are white and orange together. We'll need 18 of them that are black and orange together. And then we'll also need 6 of them that are black and white together. So what we're doing is we're gonna go ahead and cut out squares that are 4 inches around, so a 4-inch square here. And we'll end up cutting our half squares down to 3.5. And that way, if you're new to making half square triangles, it gives you a little room to square up and make sure that they're nice and square and they fit well together. So let's take a look at making half square triangles in case you've never made a half square triangle before. Okay, so to make our half square triangles, what we'll need is to take a pin, and you can use a pencil on this. I tend to use these friction erasable pins. They work nicely. And then you just need a ruler large enough to cover the back of your square. And what we're gonna do is draw a line diagonally from one corner to the other. And then just make sure that you can really see that mark on your square. On some of our darker fabrics, it's a little bit harder to see our line. You might consider getting like a chalk pen or some other marking if your blacks have a really dark back on them. A lot of these are now digitally printed, and so they're not so dark on the back, and so that you can still see. So then after we have that line drawn from corner to corner, we're gonna take and stack it with another color. So here is one of my sets that will be white and black. And so we just make sure that they're lined up really well. And then what we're gonna do is take it over to the sewing machine, and then this line is where we're going to line up our presser foot. So we're going to sew 1/4 inch on the left of that line and then 1/4 inch on the right of that line, because this one piece will create 2 of our half square triangles. So let's take it over to the sewing machine and get that part done. Okay, so here with our presser foot on our sewing machine, I have 1/4 inch foot for piecing. You can get different feet, but this is a clear foot for our baby lock machines. And this little indentation here on the front is 1/4 inch. So I'm gonna take and line the line that I drew up against that piece of my foot. And then the needle is over to the left 1/4 inch so that it'll sew 1/4 inch away from that line. So I'm gonna go down that side, and then I'll come back and go down the other side as well. So then I just take and spin it around so that the line again is here on the right side, lined up with the 1/4 inch piece of my foot. And then I'm gonna go down that side again so that I have sewn on both sides of that blue line. One of the reasons that I had you cut it 4 inches is that if you're not completely straight on this line the whole way down, I've given you room to kind of straighten it out before the next step. Okay, so then there you can see that we've sewn on both sides of that line. And then now we're going to take it back over to the cutting mat and actually cut on the blue line so that we end up with 2 sets of half square triangles. Okay, so we're just taking our ruler and we're laying it on that blue line. If it's not exactly on the blue line, that is in your seam allowance, so it's not really going to matter. You can even use a pair of scissors to cut that apart as well. All right, so then that's how we create these 2 half square triangles from one set. So you can see here that for the black and white, because I need 6 of them, I really only need 3 pairings of black and white to create enough that I need to create the chevron pattern in that pillow. So I'm going to take and press these, and typically with half square triangles, if we have a light and a dark fabric, we always press towards the dark side of that, and it kind of helps hide that seam allowance underneath that dark fabric. And then after that, we will square these down to 3.5 inches. Okay, so then now that we have our half square triangles pressed, then we need to take and square them down to 3.5. And the thing about squaring up half square triangles that a lot of people miss, and the reason that you see sometimes that you've knocked off a corner, is that when we square up, we need to make sure that we keep our diagonal on a 45 degree mark on a ruler. If you don't have a 45 degree mark on a ruler, you may want to make a mark or purchase one, because this really makes a difference on your half square triangles. So here I'm just going to take a little bit off of one edge, and then what we'll do is take and turn that to the other side, making sure to put the edge of that block now on the 3.5 inch mark, and then also making sure that the 45 degree mark is lined up as well. So I have one side at the 3.5 and then the 45 on the diagonal of this block. So a lot of people think then I'm squared up, but what we need to do is now square the other 2 sides. So I've done the left and right sides, and so now I need to do the top and bottom. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take and turn it just 90 degrees. We're going to just cut off a little bit from this one side. Get my 45 lined up here. Okay, so I've turned the ruler so that I can see the 45 mark on the side that I need, and we just want to make sure and just trim off a little bit of this side so that we're square. So making sure that I'm kind of keeping the edge of my block lined up with one of the marks on my ruler here, and I've got that diagonal on that 45 degree mark. So we're just trimming off a side, and then again we're going to take and turn that and measure it out to 3.5, and then trim off our other side as well. Okay. All right, so then that's how we create those 45 degree lines, and making sure that they're staying in the center of those half square blocks. And then we do the same thing to the other one. And so then again, we're going to need 6 of the black and whites, and then we're going to need to make 12 of the orange and white, and then 18 of these black and white ones. And so I'm going to do that, and then we'll take a look at how they line up in our pillow. Okay, so here is the top row of that pillow, and I wanted to show you just kind of how they went in here. So then we have the orange on the bottom left, and then the next one is going to have the orange on the bottom right. And you just kind of keep that pattern going so that when we sew these together, we kind of get this triangular effect on these middle 2 pieces. And then we have these 2 outside that kind of lean out to create that top of that chevron piece here. Okay, so then that's the first row. With our second row, we want to make sure that the black is staying on the bottom right, and then on the bottom, on the bottom left, and then the next one is going to have the bottom right. And so that creates that V shape that's going to travel across our pillow. So then probably what's going to be easiest to do for anyone that's new and has never really put anything pieced together, because this basically is like a little bitty quilt, we can just put these 4 blocks together. So what we'll do is I'll sew these 2 in row 1 together, and then also these 2 in row 2 together. And what we need to make sure and do is to press the seams in opposite directions. So for the top one, I'll press towards the right, and then on the bottom one, I'll press towards the left. And that creates this piece that is called nesting, where the seams go one way on one side and the other way on the other side. And then when we try to sew the long seam together, then it lays flat at that point where they all meet, and it just looks a lot nicer. So let me take care of ironing those 2, and then we'll look at sewing that piece together. So here we're just going to take and use that 1/4 inch seam again. It's really important throughout the whole project that we're using a 1/4 inch seam. On some of your machines, it may try to bunch up on you at the beginning because it's a little bit thicker. So you may need to just start a little bit forward and then back up to the edge and come back, depending on your machine. Okay, so then now that I've sewed the seams here on these 2 pieces and then down this side, we're going to actually connect these 2 together. And what we'll do, you have to make sure that you keep it in this pattern. And so one of the pieces is just making sure you really watch where your seam's at. We're going to take and flip this on top of the one here on the bottom. And then here we can see that on the back, the seam is pushing over here to the left. And then here on the front, you can see that it's moving more towards the right. And so what we do is we nest them, kind of rub them together and make sure they're really tight, but not overlapping at that point. And then you can use pins or fork pins. I have some here. And what I like to do is just run a pin kind of through the middle of that, and it keeps it nice and straight for me. And then I'll also come out here and make sure that I'm matching pretty well on the outside corners, and I'll run a pin through that side and then on the other side as well. And then we will take that back to the sewing machine and we will run that seam here. And then on this one, I'll just make sure on all my rows that I'm just pressing the seam up each time. When you get to the point where they meet, just make sure that that bottom piece is tucked under and it's still laying nice and flat. And then you never want to run over your pin, so I'm removing them as I come up to them. And then that way we have that one 4-patch put together for our pillow. And we're just going to continue to work those pieces together all the way across so that we have those 2 rows completed. Okay, now that we have those 4 patches put together, we are ready to finish off this pillow. So let's take a look at getting that last piece together. And then I'm going to show you one of the tricks that I do with my pins when I need to put a lot of pieces together and keep up with which direction I need to press my seams so that they nest nice together. So here's what it looks like after I've got all of those 4 patches together, and you can really see that chevron pattern start to develop here in my pieces. And now I just need to sew these 9 blocks together. And for each one of those, on each row, what needs to happen is that, like on the top row, I need my seam to be pressed to the right, and then on the next one, I need it to be pressed to the left, and then on the bottom to the right. And then that way, when we get these blocks together, here at these corner pieces where they meet, they're gonna lay nice together. And so when I'm doing a large project like this, so that I don't have to keep up with going and sewing 2 together and then coming back and making sure that it's pressed the right way, I put a straight pin on the side that I'm going to press towards. And so then here on this top row, I've put them over here on the sides. And when I go to iron, I just make sure that this block with the pin in it is on top, and then I press that seam back. And so then here on this one, I've added straight pins on both those blocks because I'm going to press towards the left, and on the bottom I'm going to press towards the right. And that way I can take several of these pieces and run them over to the sewing machine together and press those. So that's the way that I'll do that. I'll run these seams together, and then I'll put this block on each one of those to create the 3 rows that we have. And then we'll run the long seams here to connect those rows. So let me get started on that piece. All right, now that we have our rows together, we just need those last 2 seams to get this front piece completed. And then again, just as you're going, you're flipping these together and you're making sure that you try to nest at each one of those points so that it lays nice and flat. So I'll get that done and we'll have our front together. All right, and as you can see, we have our top completely together, and now we're gonna need to work on our back. One thing that I'll mention about the front is that before you go and put the back on it, I'm not gonna do it to this particular piece, but you could go in and quilt. And on our actual example over here, I did quilt it before, and I just took and layered batting and muslin behind this top piece, or if you just have a piece of scrap fabric that you never really cared for, it makes a great inside of a pillow for this because you're just laying those together. And then for the quilting part, all I did was go and lay my foot against the seams here on these zigzags, and then I sewed like a 1/4 inch away from it on the top and the bottom. So I just kind of like echoed across that chevron and really made that chevron stand out with the quilting. So that can be done or not done. So now let's take a look at what we'll need to get our back together. So one thing I like to do with my pillows is actually add a zipper and then cover that with a flap. It looks a lot nicer, and then a lot of people say they don't like laying on zippers, and so this covers up that piece in case it's laying on a couch in our living rooms. So let me show you how I put a zipper in the back of a pillow. So here we have the top and the bottom of the pillow piece, and again, it just needs to be as wide as your pillow is going to be, and then the distance here for each of these pieces is about half of the distance of the length here of your pillow. And so what I do is I take a zipper, and if it's a little bit longer than your piece, it just makes it easier to put in. And then I do have that flap, and that was a 4-inch piece that we ironed in half. And then that's gonna go over the top of this and then the other side. So first off, we're gonna take, and I like to lay my zippers the way that they're gonna end up being so that you make sure and get these sewn in the right direction. And so we're just gonna take our zipper and lay it with the right side down on top of our bottom fabric. And we're just gonna sew a 1/4 inch down the side of this piece. I'll take it over to the sewing machine and show you how I do that on the Baby Lock Altair. I was using a 1/4 inch foot to do all of my piecing, so I'm just going to take it off and add back in our general purpose foot, or the J foot. Just snap it back on and make sure my thread is tucked back underneath our foot. And then I'm just going to make sure that my zipper is right side down on our fabric. If your zipper has a metal piece on it, you just want to make sure that you're either watching for it or you make sure it's outside your project to be cut off later. We don't want to have, when we come back on this seam, run into that metal piece. So that's why that's important to make sure that you're watching for that. I'm just going to move it up kind of out of my way, so I'll chop it off in a second. So when I'm adding a zipper to a back, instead of using a zipper foot, I use a general purpose foot. But oftentimes the teeth try to push the zipper out of the way. And the way I get around that is to actually move my needle. So to move our needle over on our screen, we're just going to hit the number 1. And what that does is move it over to the left. If you don't have that as a selection, what you're going to do is actually use your width button at the bottom of your screen and move it all the way over to 0. With our needle in the leftmost position, then what I'm going to do is actually run the zipper and the fabric down the inside of the metal piece over here on the right side of the foot. And then that keeps the zipper teeth over here against the left side of this foot. And then I'm just going to sew all the way down. And then to make sure that you're keeping the zipper and the fabric in line together as you go down the side of that zipper. So here I'm getting really close to the zipper pull, and so I'm just going to raise my foot and kind of slide that underneath and back out of the way. Then put my presser foot back down and line up the rest of that side. Okay, and that gives us that good seam down. You always want to also take and press that back away from the zipper teeth. And so then to top stitch that, so I've got the fabric facing more towards the back piece of fabric and not underneath the zipper, because that's when your zipper teeth get hung in the fabric. If you've ever had that happen, that's because this fabric wasn't pushed out of the way. So we're going to put that back under our foot. I'm going to put the seam where the two fabric, or the zipper and the fabric meet, on the inside again against that on the right side of the foot, but on the left side of this metal piece that sticks out. So just kind of got the seam nested against that. And then I'm going to put my needle back at center. Okay, so now that we have it set all the way to the left before, we're going to move it back to center. And again, on our screen, if you don't have the selection buttons, you're just going to set your width back to 3.5, which is at center of the machine. And then we're just going to run a seam right along that piece. If you think that that distance is a little bit too wide with the zipper that you're using, just move your needle back a little bit more towards the right with your width control. I am kind of making sure that I pull the fabric taut as I'm going down so that it lays a little flatter. Okay, and then just here at the end, again, we've got to get that zipper pull out of the way. Sometimes you kind of have to angle it to get it to go underneath that foot. Drop our presser foot back down and then finish that seam. Okay, and so then that has the bottom part of our pillow finished. Now that we have our zipper attached to the bottom part of our fabric, now we need to add the top piece and attach that flap. So what we're going to do is lay our flap on top of our zipper, and just note that I have the raw edges against the top of the zipper. So you want that finished edge to be the flap. Okay, so we're laying that on top, and then we're going to take and put our fabric right sides together on top of that piece. And the other thing here, when we do this piece of our zipper, you want to make sure that these fabrics are in line on this side. Oftentimes you'll get them off and then you don't have enough fabric to be able to finish your pillow. So we're just taking and sandwiching this all together. So we have that piece with the right side, or the wrong side up. So we have it against the raw edges of that fabric that we're using to cover up our zipper. That's against the zipper from the last one. And again, we're making sure to line up here. So then I'm going to do the same thing and run a seam down that side of the pillow. So just like we did before, I've moved my needle all the way over to the left. So anytime I'm attaching fabric to a zipper, I move it over to the left. And then when we're top stitching it out of the way, then we'll move it back to center. And so here we're just layering those fabrics together, making sure that we stay in line with this other fabric. And then you can also, like if you fuss with it, you can pin it. I don't worry about pinning it, but you certainly can. Okay, so we're lining up with the inside of the right side of this presser foot. Okay, so I'm getting really close to my zipper pull. So I'm gonna raise my presser foot, kind of angle our fabric at kind of a diagonal to our foot, and then that'll allow us to slide that zipper up out of our way. Okay, we're gonna make sure that we get everything else back in line, and then we're gonna drop that presser foot and finish that seam. Okay, so this time we're top stitching between the tab of fabric that I have covering the zipper and then the backing fabric. So you don't want to make You don't want to sew it this way so that the zipper is exposed, but you want to have that flap down over the zipper. So this time it's a little bit easier to lay it against the left side of our presser foot, and then again I'm just going to be on the inside of that metal. Here we need to make sure that since we're top stitching, we're going to move that needle back to center. Making sure to kind of pull our fabric so that it lays flat again. And there we have our back sewn together with our zipper. And then always make sure that your zipper actually works so that before we get it all sewn together, if you need to make adjustments, you certainly can. So let's go add our back onto our pillow. Okay, so we have the front of our pillow and we're making sure that the chevron is actually running the same direction as the back of our fabric. And then here, when we start to put these together, we need our back piece to be the same size as our front. And what I've done is taken that middle seam and kind of placed it over the zipper. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect on these. And then I'm going to trim the sides to be the same width. I'm going to go ahead and turn this and cut that zipper strip to be the same width as our pillow as well. And you can see here, like, you just cut right through the zipper tape. Make sure that your zipper pull stays inside your pillow. You don't want to lose that. And then we're just making sure that that side is laid down nice and flat before we take off that piece. So when we're adding the back to our pillow, you kind of have two choices. We have these two already made, and the easiest way to put it back on a pillow is to actually put them right sides together. So you can see here I have the back and the front. Just put them right sides together and then just sew around the outside. When you do it that way, the only thing you have to be really cautious of is that you leave your zipper open a little bit here on the side so that you can get your hand and turn it inside out. So that is the only thing you really have to watch. And so it may be easier even to sew it from the back. Have it this way. And then you're gonna sew all the way around. And then you just need to make sure that this is staying open so that you can get your hand in it when you sew all the way around it. The other option, like we did on the pillow that we have here, is actually to bind the outside of our pillow. And the way that you do that is actually to take and put your pillows right sides together, and always make sure that your flap is facing towards the bottom of your pillow. So I'm going to lay it with the right side down and the wrong side facing up. And then we're going to take our pillow front and lay it on top of that piece. And then we're just going to sew around the outside, basting it together. And then that just holds it down till we can go back and add the binding. Okay, so for this version, I took it over to the sewing machine and I did sew all the way around and made sure that my zipper was open so that we can flip our pillow through that opening. When you sew it this way, make sure that you dog ear your corners, and to dog ear, you're just going to make sure and trim off at an angle, making sure not to catch where you sewed, and that'll make your corners pop out a little bit nicer. Okay, so then after we have that, we're just going to pull our pillow through our opening. And then here, we just want to make sure that we really push out corners of our pillow so that we get those nice points. And then you can use something like a pencil to make sure and get all those corners out really nicely. The other thing that I would suggest is to take this to your ironing board and make sure and seat the seams. So really work them back and forth and get them even. And then here on the sides where our zipper is, make sure that you are pressing that really nicely so that we have our full pillow here, and then using a pillow insert to put inside of it. And then that way too, with the zipper, it makes it easy to remove and wash these and then add them back to your pillow. If you want to add the binding to your pillow and you've never made binding before, we actually have another video on our channel that can walk you through that process. And there we have our Chevron pillow all put together. It was a really fun project to work on, and you learned lots of great skills through doing this project. So we hope that you enjoyed working with us today, and like always, thanks for letting us take your inspiration and turn it into creation. If you liked what you saw today, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. And if you want to receive those notifications, make sure you click on the bell icon. Thanks for letting us turn your inspiration into creation.